It's actually just gone 8:05, so I think we should start. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we do start. I've been asked to tell you that the fire exits are to the left. I can't do it both hands because I'm holding a microphone, but to the left and to the right and behind you. And there is no fire alarm planned. So if you hear the alarm, make your way calmly out of the building, please. And just to also let you know that the meeting is being live streamed, so I hope that's okay. So if I can introduce myself. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jackie Lefton, and I am co-chair of Aldenham Parish Council with Councillor Estelle Samuelson, who I think is going to raise her hand and wave at you now. Excellent. And first, may I extend a warm welcome to you all for attending the Aldenham Parish meeting, the first meeting to be held in person since the pandemic. The annual meeting gives us the opportunity to tell you what we have been doing over the last year on your behalf, and to give you the opportunity to raise any questions that you may have. The format of the evening is set out in the agenda, but unfortunately our speaker, Paul Rabbits, is unable to join us due to a bereavement. So if we can now turn please to agenda item Councillor Caroline Clapper, Councillor Catherine Killams. Any other apologies, Peter? That's it, thank you. Agenda item 3, to receive and, if so resolved, confirm the minutes of the annual parish meeting held on the 14th of March 2019. Is there anyone that would, do we need to forward and second? No. Any questions in relation to those? No, thank you. So if we can now turn to agenda item 4, which are the annual reports. You'll see in the pack that you've got in front of you the annual reports. I hope you've had a chance to look at them. As chair, I just wanted to draw your attention to one or two items in the chair's report. The chair's report refers to some of the most important work by the parish council over the last year. Many of these activities will be described by the chairs of the committee and working groups. However, there is one matter on which I would like to update you. As you may know, the application for a solar farm near Butterfly Lane and Hillfield Lane was rejected by Hertsmere Borough Council in November last year. Regrettably, there has been an appeal against this decision, and so there will be an inquiry. The council will continue to fight this application, and with the assistance of a planning barrister, will do our best to persuade the inquiry to reject the appeal. There is one area in the report I would like to highlight, as it will not be covered in any of the other reports. Over the last year, we have reorganised the way the council operates by replacing some of our committees with working parties. The reason we have done so is that working parties can be joined by residents who do not have the time to be councillors, but would still like to be involved in local issues. This is an excellent way to bring in additional expertise to help the council's work. If you are interested in joining one of these groups, please do let me know. In place of the open spaces and community development committees, we have working parties dealing with ongoing responsibilities and with specific projects such as the improvements at Phillimore Recreation Ground and the Platinum Jubilee. So I wonder now if we can look at each of the committees and the working parties in turn. We will be taking questions, but these will be at the end. If we could start with Finance and General Purposes, and that's Councillor Mark Cherry. Thank you. I think there's a microphone there.
Is it working? Yes. Evening, everybody. Just quickly, I'd like to run through the Finance and General Purposes Committee. Its term of reference, for those of you that don't know, is the responsibility to Aldenham Parish Council for budgetary control, risk management, insurance, health and safety, and various council policies, and the management of the council's properties, reserve, and all staff matters. As stated in the report that you have in front of you, our reserves at the 1st of April were 1,367,955, which is, some of it is reserved for particular capital projects. A significant amount is used for ongoing running costs. There's funds in there which form part of the community infrastructure levy, which we have allocated to various projects. And the remaining is reserves that APC have built up over the time and is invested appropriately according to local government guidelines. So it's in a mixture of cash, bonds and investment management portfolios. Although our reserves are healthy, APC has a number of capital projects planned, and as Councillor Lefton just alluded to, we have plans for the Phillimore Rec, where we're submitting a planning application for a cafe. There's planned works and initiatives at King George V playing fields, which over the next few years, hopefully the community will benefit from. In the last year, we've also actively encouraged groups who require capital sums to approach us and apply for monies, which in some cases we've granted. They're particularly for capital projects, so we've helped Alden Memorial Hall, we've helped the Scouts, we've helped the Bowls Clubs, all by using money that comes to us through the CIL levy, which since the Radlett Neighbourhood Plan was approved has increased to 25% rather than the previous 15%. This year we've increased the precept by 2.14%. We endeavoured to keep it as low as possible. Last year we actually managed to reduce it. I think it was by about 7.4%. So over the last 2 years it really is still showing a decrease from what it was previously, but we've had to make some significant decisions on maintaining costs and controlling costs. And each year we endeavour to improve the services whilst offering value for money with greater efficiency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I wonder if we can now turn. I think you don't need to sit down, Councillor Cherry, because you're coming with your second hat on. Planning Committee, thank you.
Right, during COVID, we were obviously on Zoom, and it was nice to see at our meetings, which are held roughly every 2 weeks, that people were participating and putting their points forwards on various applications. We have seen, I suppose, if you look at the profile of the planning applications, it tends to be for significant house changes, so a lot of smaller houses either being altered or in many cases demolished and rebuilt with larger properties. We've also seen some flatted schemes come up. And again, alluded to earlier, we've had 2 significant planning scenarios which we've addressed. One was obviously the solar farm, where we engaged a planning consultant to help us submit our response, which hopefully helped parishioners to formulate their own responses. And also there was the draft local neighbourhood plan, which had significant impact proposed on the Greenbelt. Draft local plan, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the Radlett Neighbourhood Plan was also approved, and we've been monitoring it in our various planning committee meetings, and we've noticed that more and more some of the issues that have been addressed in the Radlett Neighbourhood Plan have been picked up by planning officers at Hartsmere, which is good to know. it's important to, we sometimes, people sometimes think Aldenham Parish Council is a deciding authority, but I'd imagine just looking at the faces here, most people know it's only a statutory consultee. And whilst people who are objecting to applications or making comments on applications send them to Hertsmere, it would be quite nice if sometimes they could send them to us. Although some people do, it's nice to know what the local population is thinking. And I'd like to thank, we have a co-opted member, Graham Taylor, who gives us very valuable guidance and advice, and also the team at APC for their help and work they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cherry. The next item was the Phillimore Rec Improvement Working Party. Unfortunately, Councillor Killams isn't able to be with us. If you have any questions on that one, maybe, again, we'll take those at the end. If we can turn to agenda item 4E, the Queen's Jubilee Working Party. Councillor Jones, thank you very much.
Good evening. It's lovely to see you all here. Hopefully, by now you will have seen some of the advertisement for the Queen's Jubilee, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is the first in British history for a monarch to reach 70 years. Because it's such a momentous occasion, the Council is trying to host two community events to bookmark the weekend. So we're going to have something on the Thursday, the 2nd of June, at Tabard Rugby Club, and that will be part of the national chain of beacons being lit across the nation. So for the whole evening, we will have a DJ, we'll have food, we'll also have a fun fair with bigger rides than we're used to, because we've received feedback previously that the rides we've had are for the very small children, and the older kids in Radlett would like something to do. So we've got full-size dodgems, we have a sky dancer, we have a giant inflatable slide. So hopefully this will be something for our older kids and teens to come along and be involved with the community. At 10:45 that evening, we will have a community song with a community choir, and then a bugle call, followed by the lighting of the beacon, which will, as I say, take part with the whole nation at that time. It is a free event. The tickets for the rides are £10. You'll get a wristband, and then you get unlimited rides for the whole night. And our hope with doing that is that it'll be accessible for people even with several children, because they're not having to repeatedly pay throughout the night, and the kids want more goes. As we're bookmarking the weekend, so the other end is the Sunday, the 5th of June, from 12 till 5, and that is taking place on our very own High Street. We'll be closing the Watling Parade in front of the shops. There'll be 150 tables, and they can be purchased for £20 each, and they hold 8 to 10 people, depending on how cosy you like to be with your friends. The hope is everyone will bring a picnic, get involved, have that big community lunch together, and we can celebrate as one community. To facilitate that, there's stuff going on all the way around, so that even if you haven't managed to get a table, you can still come to the High Street and be involved. We've got acts for the whole 5 hours. We've got the Watford Brass Band, the Victory Girls, a circus workshop. We've got face painting. We've got a fun fair for the little kids. We have community stalls with the museum and the Scouts and some of the schools having stalls there. So hopefully that will be another event where everybody can get involved. We've been very fortunate to have grants from Debenhams Ottaway, our long-time sponsor. So our thanks go to them for our help with this big event, because it really does help when we have local businesses. And we're very fortunate this year to have a second sponsor with Beaver Travel, who've been given a specific budget to help with our access arrangements. We have you'll hear from them shortly, have an Access for All working party, where we're trying to improve accessibility in Radlett for everybody. So this means we've had specific disabled parking. On the day of the big lunch, the whole of the parking at the Radlett Centre will be reserved for disabled people. Ensuring that there's disabled toilets at events we hold. Ensuring that there's safe spaces for people who need that bit of extra time away. That those who need it can have a special lanyard and cut the queues if they find it too difficult. There's lots of other stuff happening, but I'll leave that for my colleague to talk about. But it's been really great to have a sponsor from the High Street really working with us to help make that possible for this big event. So our thanks to them as well. I think that's everything, but I'm also...
Yes, thank you very much. And Councillor Jones is also the chair of the Winter Fair Working Party.
Yes.
So if you'd like to tell us about that as well, thank you.
Thank you. So with my second hat on, I was also chair for the Working Party for the Winter Fair, which we were able to hold last December. It was absolutely brilliant to have was it November? No, November. Sorry. It was absolutely brilliant to have a community event. I think it was one of the first that were being held, and even as we were planning it, we were uncertain about whether we could actually go ahead, and a lot of decisions had to be made at the last moment once it was confirmed that we could. But we introduced a lot of changes. We had a one-way system. We had fewer stalls, so there was more space in here. The doors open, we asked people to wear masks, etc. And it did actually feel like a very safe event. The response from people was that they felt it was safe. That was wonderful to hear. We did have 13 stalls, a nice selection of things for people to buy for Christmas, but also community stalls like the WI. And the Radlett Youth Council were there and had a really nice tombola, which sold out actually before the event finished because it was a really good success, which is lovely. Once again, we had our Access for All hat on. We made sure that we had the accessibility for the rides outside and a space. So that was wonderful. The highlight, I think, well, for me personally, because I organised it, was that our Christmas lights were switched on by our competition winner. So we had a competition throughout Aldenham schools to find a logo for the Jubilee. So hopefully if you've seen our adverts, you'll have seen that logo out and about. And our winner, Ionis, turned the lights on. And that was wonderful to have local talent designing our logo and then there for the switch on. We also had Santa visiting, and we had really good sales for the tickets. And well, I have a little girl. That was her first experience getting to meet Santa. So it was wonderful to see all these families getting to have those memorable experiences once again. I want to particularly thank Monica, our Deputy Clerk. As I said, it was a lot of work in a very short space of time once we could hold the event, and she did an incredible job, so thank you, Monica. Thank you.
That's really great. Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. And finally, if we can turn to 4G, the Access for All Working Party, and that's Councillor Diskin. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm fairly new to the council, so this is my first AGM. The Access for a Working Party really says what it is on the tin. It's something that we aspire to be, which is that across everything that we do as a group of people, across all these working parties, that we consider how it relates to everybody in the community and whatever their needs are. When I joined the council, I was very open-minded about what I might get involved with, but I'm also the parent of 4 children, 2 of who are autistic, 1 who has severe learning disabilities also. So my experience being, in the world with children who have those needs is that quite often events that take place, planning, things that happen, or facilities and services aren't necessarily accessible in all ways to the people that need them, not just through their needs on a neurological level, but certainly physical or through sight or hearing or things that happen in older age. So what we do as a working party, and it sounds a little dry, but actually it's a lot of fun, it's very vivacious, and it has big aspirations to sit down across all political backgrounds and actually look at everything that we do and how can we make it more accessible step by step or ramp by ramp, lock by lock, disabled toilet by disabled toilet or parking spaces. One of the first things that we want to undertake as a group, and we have done, as Helen said, a lot of work already looking at our events, and with support from Monica, again, huge thanks, our marketing accessibility through what we do on social media, through our website, through materials that are printed and posters, is to think about our high street and the access that we need to have, everybody needs to have through the everyday. So one of our first steps is to undertake an independent audit through a group that we found of people, and we're looking to see when that might take place, to have a group of people literally walk our high street and look at parking and drop curbs and access through doorways, not inside buildings, that's other people's lookout, although we obviously want to think about that. But to think about what the everyday experience is for people living in our community through the eyes of people who need that help. And then with the material that we'll gather through that independent audit, start to make some headway on making more change. So you'll hear about more change, you'll see more change. If you or people that you know, people that you love, or people that you hear about don't have access to things and want to reach out to us, then this is the group to do it through. So thank you to one of our members over there sitting down, and to everybody for having me.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
I must declare an interest. I'm on the management committee of the Aldenham War Memorial Hall. Yes, of the hall. This, I think, was the first application that had been made for CIL funds under the new scheme, and it made an enormous difference to the hall. There was a sort of derelict area around the hall, and what they'd managed to do is to turn that into a sort of meeting area and a sort of an overflow point from the hall. And it really is very much appreciated by the hall committee and the residents of Lechmore Heath. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. If we can now turn to agenda item 7, to receive reports from other charities and organisations within the parish. That's in particular the Platt Foundation. I think it's just the Platt Foundation. Is there anyone from the foundation here? I don't think there is. Is that correct, Peter? Yeah, okay. So we turn to agenda item 8, to receive questions from electors. So this is your opportunity to raise anything that you wish with the council. Yes, I can see Chris at the back. Oh, I think you need to wait for a microphone.
Is that better? Is there anything more you can tell us about the development of the garage? A lot of people in Radlett have been quite concerned about it. Not me especially, but a lot of people have. And in particular, any impact it might have on Radlett Gardens?
That's a very good question. I think it's fair to say a lot of people, I think, have been very upset that the garage has been closed. And the one thing really to stress is that you can't make people run a business. If the people who own the garage don't want to run the garage, we can't make them keep the petrol station open. So the land has been sold to a developer. As you may know, some of you will know more than others, there were 2 alternatives plans put into Hertsmere Borough Council. Hertsmere Borough Council preferred the second set of plans. It's going to be something called Regency House, which is going to house 1 floor, I think, for the owner's own business. He runs care homes. 2 floors, I'm advised. I think there's going to be at least 80 parking spaces in the basement, each of which we've been advised will have an electric charging point. The building is big. There is no 2 ways about it. It has got planning permission. They have started the work. There will be an impact on Radlett Gardens. We have we will be receiving some money by way of, now is it SIL or Section 106? It's Section 106 monies in order to redevelop the gardens, and there is a strong possibility that for various legal reasons, the Leylandii trees that form the boundary between the garage and Regency House will need to be removed, but we hope to replace them with some native trees. It will cause disruption. Unfortunately, the fact that something causes disruption to traffic is not a grounds for refusing planning permission. Is there anything else that I can particularly add to that? Is there any particular concern? Yeah. Okay. We have been offered the services of the care home's own landscape gardener, and I've seen some of her designs and they did look very lovely. So I'm really hopeful that actually it's going to be awful disruption whilst it's being built, but I do hope that once it's complete, actually Radlett Gardens will look a lot better than it perhaps looks now. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Glover.
I welcome the Council's interventions in relation to the solar plant. I refuse to call it a farm, it's a plant. It's a big industrial plant. But now with the appeal, it's a very legal process, and it's actually an expensive legal process. Hertsmere, as I understand it, will be obviously putting up a case and so on. I wonder if the parish council is actually going to be doing the same thing, or whether you ought to consider that. Yeah. Because clearly it is a major impact if this thing goes ahead. And the documentation is already very suspect from what I've seen, I have to say. I'll get back into that, but it's certainly something we need to do. And the early deadline, I think, is June 7th, which is when you need to say that you're going to be doing something. Yeah,
I think that's a really good question. Just today, I've actually been in touch with a planning chambers, and we have identified a junior council that would be able to take on the case. We as a parish council are now considering, and almost certainly will, be instructing council to make representations both written prior to the inquiry and at the inquiry. We think it's really important that all of us are, well, those that do not support the solar installation, make that known to the inspector. I think if we sit back, they'll think that we're not particularly bothered, and I think many people are extremely bothered. And either through the council or through HBC or through the I was going to say support group, it's not a support group, it's campaign, please do get involved. I think we have Mr. Glover here. Please do get involved and do write your letters of complaint. That would be really helpful. But yes, we as a council will definitely be seeking legal advice. Yes, Mrs. Gray.
Yes, this is to Mark Cherry of the Planning Committee. What is your view on the fencing and removal of hedging and concreting of front gardens when a planning permission is not required, because it's against the Radlett plan, but it's changing visually the street scene? Sorry? It's a general question.
General question. Well, I think the best way of answering that is that we consider these in our planning committee, and we take a consensus view of everybody. And you've been to our planning committees, you know what we do. We look at each case on its individual merit, in particular in relation to the Radlett neighbourhood plan and the relevant design guides at Hertsmere. So if it's in breach, as we see it, of the local planning policy, we tend to make that point known to the planning officers.
But can I just say that when a planning application
Well, that's for members to highlight, and if it's perceived to be in breach of planning guidelines, then they should make that known to the planning officers, so any enforcement process can be put in place.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Treves-Brown.
Is it working? I don't.
It is.
This is Julian. I'm not really quite sure whether this is a question or not. It's more like a statement. What I wanted to tell people is that you might well remember about 20 years ago we had a youth club called the Radlett Youth Club, and just to let people know, we are in the process of re-establishing that and letting people know if people want to get involved, then please contact the council. It's not really a question, but I didn't know where to ask it. Nice to see Claire here.
That's excellent. Can I ask you, Julian, do you have a timescale or have you identified a building?
No, we haven't. At the moment, our first port of call is to get our money back from the National Westminster Bank.
Ah.
And we had our AGM actually last Wednesday. So hopefully, I would have thought in the next month or two we'll get our money back. So but I'm just sort of putting that together, and if people want to be involved or help, then please contact Peter and they can get my details. But I just thought it was a good time to tell people what's happening.
Excellent.
And we want everyone's help. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask, are there any more questions? Yes, a gentleman. Ah, Mr. Treves-Brown. Hello, good evening.
Nothing whatever to do with what Julian is raising, but my ears pricked up when I heard Mrs. Gray say something about hedges. Now, many, many, many years ago at this meeting, when Douglas Saunders was sitting where you are, I raised the problem, as it seems to me, of hedges, garden hedges, growing out over the pavement. And I assume, in rough terms, that the pavements are supposed to be wide enough for two people to walk side by side, or a lady to push her pram. As we, I guess, all know, in many cases it's not possible. The hedges have grown out, and sometimes the pavement, the width of the pavement has been halved. Now, as I say, I raised this many years ago. Martin said, oh, well, there's a phone number in Stevenage. And I phoned the Stevenage number. Yes, yes, said the lady. Yes, 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 this is what we do. And what it amounts to is a polite notice letter is sent to the householder to say, please do something. But actually, damn all happened, nothing whatever. And now here we are 20 years later, and the problem is just as bad as it ever was. Is there anything you can do about it?
Is it? I think it's the Herts County Council. We have Councillor Lambert here, who is he's Herts Borough Council. Yes.
I might be able to help. I think we used to, at the parish council, we used to sometimes send a letter, even though it's actually not in our remit. It's in the remit of the county council. So probably, if telling the Aldenham Parish Council, we can pass it on to Caroline Clapper, and she can take it up. Rain when it's wet, and you brush up against a hedge when it's wet, and you get wet as well. But I think saying it to us, we'll pass it to Caroline Clapper, and we can start taking it up, because unless she knows about individual cases, it's difficult to deal with on a general basis. Yep. Okay.
I think you raised a very good question, Mr. Treves-Brown. We can take it up, but what I think we can't do is promise that there'll be any action. In an ideal world, the county council would do the work and then add it onto whatever the council tax is, so that people actually end up paying for it. but we don't have that power.
Well, I have sometimes, Madam Chairman, thought of taking a pair of shears at midnight and ruining yourself. I'm too old for that.
It sounds like one solution. Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chairman. Having heard Christopher Treves-Brown mention about hedges, I reassure him that I've trimmed mine this afternoon, so that's all right. But there is one in, I think, if the council is going to make representations about hedges, I would suggest that the Network Rail be contacted about their overgrown hedge in Theobald Street. A lot of people walk along that part of Radlett from Newby's estate into the shops. It's really only a single file now. The hedge that is growing from the Network Rail land is more than halfway across the path in places. And so I think somebody needs to get in contact with the Network Rail. The other thing I wanted to say also, it seems to be the fashion these days to have your house illuminated outside. And there are certain notable addresses in Radlett. I find that sometimes the illumination outside can be a bit distracting when you're walking along in the dark and people have got very bright lights at their driveways. Also, lights shining illuminating trees can dazzle drivers of cars. But there seems to be no regulations about exterior lighting in driveways and houses, and I just wondered whether anyone else agrees with me on that. Thank you.
Can I just ask you, Mr. Taylor, are you referring to Theobald Street?
Yes,
in
so
relation to
for the fence,
the
this overgrown fence
yes,
on
yeah.
the north side of Theobald Street,
Yeah.
between the railway and Watling Street.
Yeah, that's where I thought. Thank you. I think regarding the illumination, I would agree with you entirely. I don't think you need planning permission for external lighting to your house. But we did have one on Aldenham Avenue, didn't we? I think that was over-illuminated. And maybe the timing. I mean, it's an awful thing to say, but electricity is getting so expensive. Maybe this will be the time that people will decide to switch off their lights. And it would be lovely if we could all have a rule, maybe at 10 o'clock, that the lighting goes off. But I'm not sure that we have the power to do anything about it. But I do think it is a concern. It is a concern, yeah. Yes, Councillor Diskin. Have a microphone.
Sorry, hello again. As part of the audit that I mentioned, it's not going to obviously be across the entirety of the parish, but there are areas where if there's a serious access issue, and people, we talk about, people just maybe getting wet, but if it actually prevents people from walking on pavements safely, or people who need to use the pavements sensibly, then that might be something in certain areas that can come under the audit. So I just wanted to thank that for being mentioned, because it's something to think about.
I think that's a really good point. And then we could go to the county council and say that there's actually an access issue because people can't use their mobility scooters on the pavement. So I think that really might give us more leverage. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions? I think we've had some really good questions from a very small audience, but you've all had lots to say, I think. Yeah. If there's no more questions, can I thank you all very much for coming this evening. Can I thank Peter Evans, who is our General Manager, and Monica, where is Monica? Monica Duong, who is our Assistant Manager, for all their help this evening, and also Sarah sitting over there also. And we've got a member of the Open Spaces team sitting at the back. Remind me his name. Dave Jenkins. So if you see Dave when you're out and about, I'm sure he would be very happy to say hello to you. Thank you. But not for too long. No, he's a busy man. Yes. 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 Lucy Selby, yes. Yeah.
A thank you to my co-chair, who, to be honest with you, has really been the chair this last year because she's taken on
I do the meetings.
lots of responsibility, and thank you very much.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody. I don't know what the score is if you're interested. No idea. But apparently there's a big Arsenal match.